This is Jeff from the Entrefied podcast. I'm glad to be with you tonight. Entrefied means entering into your success. If you're new to our website or new to our podcast, we look for points that add value to our listeners. We talk about mindset, leadership, habits, and even more. We also interview guests, so if you would like to be on the show, you can go to Entrefied.com to find out more. One of the things that we talk a lot about is leadership, mindset, and business. Business topics and things like that, even habits. So guys, the subject today is try to recognize the mental turmoil in your day so you can try to prevent that. I'm going to talk a little bit about that, but I've got a lot of points and I'll be putting those on the screen if you're watching the video to give you a little bit more clarity about what we're talking about. There may be something that's bothering us. We may not even acknowledge it, but sometimes we never speak something that is bothering us. But that don't mean it ain't bothering us. We go through a lot of stress, anxiety, and that kind of thing. Start to recognize the patterns you have. That is, if something keeps coming back up, it may be something that you need to ask, why is this happening? A lot of times our days they repeat. A lot of the same problems we keep running into. Some people say they're not worried about something, but it keeps coming back up in their mind and in their life. So what can you do about that? Little and big things, spoken and unspoken, begin to recognize when there are things that keep coming up in your mind. Then decide what you're going to do about them. And that's one of the things I want to talk about right now. Little and big things, spoken and unspoken, begin to recognize when these things are happening every day, guys. So that's the first point. You at least got to identify when it's happening. Let me be more specific. When you have something come up in your mind that bothers you every day, like for instance, there's a certain thing that happens every morning, like you're having to deal with something that you generally don't like dealing with. Okay, you got to find a way to make that better. Or every day, if it comes up every day you're going to have trouble. So why not identify something that bothers you and then try to figure out how you can do better with that? So that's the first point. And the next thing is then decide what you're going to do about it. So once you've identified it, that's one thing. But then you have to decide what you're going to do about that thing. It may sound obvious and easy to say these things, but you know how many people will not identify what they're dealing with? They think, I'll just deal with that. I'll remember that. Things will get better. Identify what the problem is, or identify, it may not be a problem for you. It may be a project. It could be something that just keeps kind of nagging at you. Or it could be just something that needs to be done. Identify what needs to be handled, whether it's a problem or, whatever it is. Identify it. Then decide what you're going to do about it. That's point number 2. If you can do something about those things, you may need to do it now. There's an urgency here. That's point number 3. So you can move on, or you can just, like I said, if you write it down, if you deal with it, at that time, write it down, deal with it at a time, you can get it off your mind. You don't have to keep going over it day in, day out. I don't know how many times I've had something I thought, I'm really not looking forward to this. I'm just really not. And I think, okay, well, I can do that tomorrow. We don't need to put things off, because here's what happens. We wind up thinking, okay, I can put that off. And then when that time comes, we're like, I don't really want to do that. I got something else to do. And you're suffering the whole time that you have to put that off because you don't really want to get it done. You don't really want to deal with it. If you just deal with it right then and get it off your plate, you're going to save yourself some grief, whatever that thing is, in most cases. So that's the point I wanted to make here. If you can do something about it, then do something about it. Don't just suffer with it on and on. Point number 4, if you cannot deal with them now, write them down for later. I mentioned that on point number 3, write it down, get it handled. But if you can't handle it right now, if you cannot deal with them right now, write down in a well-known place where you can come back to it. That's point number 4. And number 5, at the very least, decide on what you're going to do. Just decide, write it down, say, this is what I'm going to do. I may have to do this tomorrow. Most of the time, it's best to do it now. If you can get it off your plate, you're better off. So let's recap right fast. Little and big things, start to recognize those things that's throwing you off. And it could be Could be just negative thoughts. Could be things that's popping up in your mind. How can you reconstruct a positive? Somebody cuts you off in the middle of the road and you start to think bad thoughts. If you'll start to recognize those times and think, I'm not going to let this derail me. I should have been paying more attention. How can you reframe those negative things to make them into a positive, to something you can learn and be excited about? Number 2, then decide what you're gonna do about those things. Number 2. Number 3, if you can do something about them, do it. Knock it out. Don't wait. If you can't do something about them, then write it down, and that way you have it in a good place that you can come back to. And number 5, at the very least, if you don't do a lot of these, at the very least, write it down and decide what you're going to do. This may sound very basic with you guys, very elementary, but a lot of times we just keep running into the same problems in life. We keep repeating those same situations, but you need to recognize the joy killers in your day, those things that are constantly aggravating you. Now, here's the thing. I've recapped this. Here's the thing, but you've got to find a way to reconstruct things into a positive. Yes, there are situations that's going to be negative, but how can you make the best of them? I mean, it's kind of like a bad situation that when you think about it and you just don't do something about it, or you don't handle it well, it becomes worse. How can you take those negatives and make them better? You may not be able to make them perfect, but maybe it's dealing with somebody, maybe learning how to deal with people better, or not talking about people. When somebody comes and talks about somebody else and they want to talk about them, and it kind of gets you in a bad mood, focus on the positive things and being productive. I hope you guys are watching the video. If you're listening to the podcast, that's great. We also have a video on YouTube. You'll see these points, but you can also go to our website and you'll get the points that right now for free. You get the points that you can just go over this and you can read it for yourself. It's right on our website. So I'd encourage you to do that. Guys, I hope you've enjoyed this podcast. It's a very, very short podcast. I hope it's added value to your life. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.